It is the weekend, ladies and gentlemen. You know what that means. Crying over the fact that you're still missing football, but rejoicing about the fact that even though we don't have the gridiron games going on yet, you have one of the top sports podcasts that talk about it, that preview it, that love it. So, ladies and gentlemen, the weekend means one thing and one thing only. It is once again time for another episode of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. As always, one of your main hosts of the chaos, Jurgen. Wearing hockey today. Wearing a hockey shirt today. My goal is to always do the show and never have to wear a football shirt because it just makes it funnier, just makes it more chaotic, and it adds to the whole shtick of things. Speaking of chaos, a man who, and I can relate to this very much, everything around him wants to cause chaos, even though despite the fact that we want to limit the chaos to the show, just the show in and of itself, but we don't always get what we want at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. But joining me is a fellow agent of chaos here, my man Justin. Justin, how we doing? Justin,
am I on?
Yeah.
Am I crapping out?
Yeah, no, you're good, brother.
What's going on?
This is the chaos, ladies.
Oh gosh, it's gonna be a show.
Oh, absolutely. Do you want to detail to the people what's going on? Oh, by the way, Rick is not here in person once again. So, he's missing out because this might be the funniest episode yet. Justin, do you want to detail to the people what exactly is going on right now? I mean, we know of your laptop issues, but it's not the laptop today.
No, laptop's working fine. Internet went out about 30 minutes ago, 45 minutes ago. So I am working via hotspot. So let's see what's going to happen.
Fingers crossed that we can get past this episode, ladies and gentlemen. But honest and truth to God, Justin, you're a trooper for being able to get this done. But of course, we have to get this done today because tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, of course, is Father's Day. So if you are listening to this today, and if you end up listening to this tomorrow, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. Appreciate all the dads out there and all the work that they do, of course. And football is for family, and football is for father and son to enjoy. Now, it's going to be hard for father and son of some NFC South teams to enjoy this upcoming season. But we are here to break down that division. Of course, the weekly divisional breakdowns here at the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast will continue. And like I said, we're going to go the NFC South, and we will go through all four teams like we are wont to do because, I mean, if we gave Jacksonville and Houston time, we're going to give every team time. Trust me, ladies and gentlemen, your team will be mentioned for however long it will be, even if it's just a bit brief. But we will be going over the NFC South today, talk about what the Falcons and Panthers could potentially look forward to if maybe the Panthers can turn around all our thoughts to what their 2022 could be. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the two main teams of that division, the Saints and the Buccaneers. And then, of course, at the end of it, just like last week, and we're going to do this for every single division review or division preview, I should say, we are going to give our personal standings predictions, 4-1, 1-4, however, whatever order we do it in, and how we see the division shaping up. We don't necessarily need to name wildcard teams as we go because once we finish all 8 divisions, we will do a episode where we all give who our 7 playoff teams will be in each conference for this upcoming season. Can't wait for that episode, ladies and gentlemen. But you will get our division winners at the end of this and every single division episode. So, Justin, we know how it's going to go. We know we're doing the NFC South. I think it's funny that Rick specifically misses the AFC and the NFC South. Just, by by complete and utter chance he does. So that absolutely works for us. So we're going to start things off. And Justin, I want to start us off in this in particular with just begin with the Atlanta Falcons. I think there's no bones about it. I think we might as well just begin with the Atlanta Falcons for conversation purposes in regards to this division. The Atlanta Falcons, God, there's so many words to describe them. And at the very same time, it's kind of simple. And this is kind of going to be what I would consider a lost season for Atlanta, really, at the end of the day. I think that the Falcons' 2022 campaign's hopes, just quickly, like just to summarize it very early, it's not going to be a great year for Atlanta in 2022. Justin, I think you can concur with that. I think Atlanta's going to have a hard time in a lot of games. I think that they're going to be overwhelmed in a lot of games because just at the end of the day, I mean, we'll go through the roster here in a very brief moment. There's not a lot on this team. Now, there are bits and pieces of talent throughout the lineup, but it takes more than bits and pieces to do something. So, Justin, give your thoughts on the Atlanta Falcons. I think this is just going to be essentially a lost year for them. I don't think there's really much reason for them to look forward to much winning here. What can you say about the Falcons going into this upcoming season?
Well, I do think that they have some pieces there. There's certainly some talented young players. Uh, uh, they just drafted a couple good players also. The issue is I don't know what to think about their quarterback. I like Desmond Ritter coming out of college, but I don't expect him to do much in the beginning of the year. They're going to have offensive line woes. I don't think their running game is going to be so hot. It's just Cordero Patterson there, who realistically only came on late in his career, so he's no spring chicken. It's going to be tough for them to get over this hurdle, and especially with honestly three good defenses in their division. People forget the Carolina Panthers were getting after the quarterback last year. I know they did lose Stephon Gilmore, but listen, they're a good young defense. So their problems are more on offense. So we'll see. I don't expect much. I kind of think they're going to go like the way of the Houston Texans, where they're going to say, "Hey, listen, are you part of the solution, or are you not here next year?" And survival will be the name of the game, not necessarily for the Falcons as a team, but for the individual player. So it's it's going to be a long, interesting season for them.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, we brought this up last week, you, me, and Rick, when we were talking about the Texans roster. And I think it bears repeating for the Falcons as well. This is really a chance for a lot of these guys to make an impact in the NFL, to get good film on tape, to stay in the thoughts of not just the decision makers in Atlanta, but also the decision makers throughout the league, really. I mean, you just look at this roster, like up and down as a whole, kind of like you mentioned, like just skill position wise, there just isn't a lot here for whoever the quarterback is. We assume, of course, it's most likely going to be Marcus Mariota, pending injury. He'll be Marcus Mariota is currently day to day in my mind for everything, because he has always been day to day and week to week throughout the entirety of his career. But Marcus Mariota is going to be the starter to begin this season. Felipe Franks is on the roster, previous quarterback that they got from a previous draft. And of course, they got Desmond Ritter this year. We'll see when, if/when, more likely towards when we see Desmond Ritter ultimately take the field for Atlanta this season. But you just look at this roster, like you said, I mean, they have a young guy in Caleb Huntley there. They got Damian Williams, who's a veteran. They got Cordell Patterson, just not impressive there. And then the wide receiving core, I mean, Cameron Batson, Geronimo Allison, Demir Bird, maybe he could do something. Kaderl Hodge. At one point, he was a good college receiver. Calvin Ridley's out for the whole year. Like, just there is not a high amount of skill position talent to help whoever the quarterback is going to be. Now, you do have on this roster, you have Kyle Pitts, who you drafted last season. Like that is going to be the go-to target for whoever the quarterback is. There just is not a lot offensively for this team to really go behind. I think it's going to be like, again, these pieces on offense trying to prove themselves. And then also you look at it defensively. I think it's funny, actually, Justin, I was reviewing this roster here, and linebacking wise, there's actually a couple names you might recognize when you look at the roster of this team, at least from the linebacker position. You got Lorenzo Carter, the former Giant, who linebacker. He's also been put in some pass rush sets. I want to say he had 5 or 6 sacks last season. You have Rashawn Evans there, former Tennessee Titan, I believe, former Seattle Seahawk. Actually, no, I think he's just mainly a former Tennessee Titan. And then you have Deion Jones, who's been a fixture of that defense ever since he got drafted into the league. Nick Kwiatkowski, again, who's a veteran there. You just have recognizable names, funny enough, along that linebacking core. I think the defensive line is one where you need to hope that someone can break out. Arnold Ebiketie is there, the youngster that they got recently. So you hope that he can make an impact on the team this year. And then the defensive back crew, from veterans like Casey Hayward in there to a young guy and a Jalen Dalton to their number one corner in AJ Terrell. And then a couple safeties that you hope pan out. It's all about these guys making names for themselves individually. Kind of like what we talked about with the Texans last week, Justin. Like, you're not going to get team results from this club. You're going to get individual results. And if you're a Falcons fan, you just hope that any of these guys can look like they can make contributions to this team going forward. Because let's be real here, like, the goal for Atlanta this season is to get that top 3, top 5 pick next year, going into next year's draft, right? Yeah, absolutely. So I think we said our piece, but of course, ladies and gentlemen, just like last week, he may not be here with us physically, but in spirit, he is always with us to at least haunt me, because he has made the promise that he will haunt me even when he eventually passes into the great beyond. So let's get what Rick's take on the Atlanta Falcons are for this upcoming season.
I think for Atlanta this year, the real testament to them is going to be youth. And it starts with the quarterback, because you've got Marcus Mariota as a starting QB, but you've also got Desmond Ritter, who they drafted this year as a potential backup and possibly a guy who will take over towards later in the season. That's what I see from Atlanta. I see Atlanta kind of taking over with Ritter in the middle of the season. I feel like it's going to be one of those moments where they just need to reset. And they have Drake London and Kyle Pitts, who are talented wide receiver targets for their quarterbacks. Defense is looking pretty good for them. I think you're going to have a nice year from Grady Jarrett on the defensive end there, and I think the corner tandem of Casey Hayward and AJ Terrell is going to be an interesting group. The problem with Atlanta is that their schedule doesn't really work for them. I mean, when you're playing the Rams, the Bengals, the Ravens, the Cardinals, and then the Buccaneers twice, it's going to be a tough year, especially for a team without Matt Ryan. So I think Atlanta's going to have a really difficult time. I think you're going to see them a little higher on the draft board again for the 2023 draft, but they're not going to take a quarterback because I think they're good with Ritter and Mariota. I can see them having a good pick for a wide receiver to help out in that room. But all in all, it's going to be a rough second year for Arthur Smith and a rough time for Atlanta without Matt Ryan.
Honestly, kind of surprised me when he said, well, okay, if the Falcons don't end up going quarterback next year, we're looking way down the line. We don't really need to get into it now, but he said wide receiver. I mean, yes, Drake London there. I'm not going to lie. I actually kind of forgot about Drake London when I was going through the roster. I feel bad for the kid. But there's Drake London, there's Kyle Pitts. I wouldn't think receiver would be a need. I think maybe offensive line would more so be something that they would have to target if they're going to be that confident in Desmond Ritter after the season for whatever he showcases to them. That in and of itself is for certain, ladies and gentlemen. So the Atlanta Falcons, that's kind of your breakdown for the Falcons. And Rick really summarized everything that we talked about there. It's player watching for this team. It's hoping that guys are going to be able to step in and step up whenever they do indeed get that opportunity. That's really more what it's going to be about when it comes to Atlanta as a whole. Justin, any final thoughts on the Falcons here? Is there anything that we've missed, or is Atlanta 2022 essentially just when does Desmond Ritter take the field? Justin. As the technical difficulties continue, ladies and gentlemen. That right there is the true essence of the Sports Agents Chaos of Podcast. So with the NFC South breakdown really continuing here, we've gone over the Atlanta Falcons and what the season could end up becoming for them. Now I think it's time that we take it to the next team, Justin. The Atlanta Falcons, I think we've given them all the time that they need. Let's get to the teams that could end up being semi-interesting this season. Let's start with the Carolina Panthers in this division. I don't even know where to begin with the Panthers. There's a lot we could break down. You slightly mentioned the Panthers actually when you talked about some of the defenses. So Justin, I want to throw it to you first. Like, what is it about the Panthers that could make them a surprise team this season?
Well, I'm going to try and say it quick so that I can maybe fit in all my stuff without hopping out again. Listen, they have a strong defense. They should be able to, really take on a lot of these teams, get after the quarterback, and force you to get that ball out quickly. They revamped their offensive line. They've worked really hard in getting the best team they could around a quarterback. Now it's going to be, who is going to take this team to the next step? Is it going to be Sam Darnold? Is it going to be Matt Corral? Or are they going to go with a quarterback next year? So I think you're going to see a lot of, moving pieces. Hopefully Christian McCaffrey can stay healthy for the first time in 3 seasons, because they are going to need his help. And if he stays healthy,
that is how Carolina Panthers fans have been feeling about the whole tenure of this team the last couple seasons. On if Christian McCaffrey can stay healthy, what does the future of this team look like, ladies and gentlemen? I mean, Justin brings up a very good point when it comes to the quarterbacks. Really, the quarterback situation is what's ultimately going to decide things for Carolina and who's going to be the signal caller. I gotta say, and this could be interesting, and as we potentially welcome him back into the stream here. I think, we talk about Sam Darnold, we talk about if Matt Corral gets time, we talk about who the quarterback could be next season. I think there's a name that has come up here recently that I think we should consider here, Justin. When it comes to the Panthers here, offensively, let's just focus on the offense for a second. Do you buy in that they are seriously going after Baker Mayfield at this point?
Why not? He'd be the best quarterback on their roster today. It would depend on how much they need to give up to get him, and it would depend on how much, how much of his salary they would need to take against the cap. But he's the best quarterback out there, in my opinion. He's taken the Browns, who've been, a nothing franchise for as long as I can remember, and he put them back on the map. I mean, obviously, look, they were a complete team. They had a great defense, they had an excellent running game, they had decent receivers, but that doesn't matter if you don't have a quarterback that can at least take you to the promised land. So, a solid defense, a top running back in the league, and Baker Mayfield might be enough to get you to the playoffs in a weaker NFC this season. So we'll see if they make that trade. I don't necessarily think it's going to be a bad thing. I think Baker's gotten a bum rap. I'm not going to sit here and say he's, the next coming of Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, but he's a decent, serviceable quarterback in this league, and he's still got good football left in him. So,
yeah, and it's funny, and I know we're speaking hypotheticals when it comes to it, so I will delve us away from the Baker conversation, but I do think that if the Panthers want to give themselves a chance, and look, all due respect to Sam Darnold himself, but Baker has shown us to this point that he can make some plays in the game. He can have some games where he can be that guy for your offense, and he's also shown that if the system is right, him and that team can do something. I mean, we just talked about it when it comes to Cleveland, that the two running back set that they had this past season and the season before really was a key to the success. Well, if Christian McCaffrey can stay healthy this season, you can run a two-back set of either Christian McCaffrey and Chuba Hubbard, or Christian McCaffrey and Dante Foreman, who they added to the team. And that's really what you're looking at here for Carolina, is that how can the skill position group help whoever the quarterback ends up being, even if it's Sam Darnold still, or the should have been XFL MVP PJ Walker. There are pieces on this Carolina Panthers team to really help the quarterback succeed. Yes, absolutely. Wide receiver wise as well, there's a couple decent pieces, like Rashard, funny enough, actually a former Cleveland Brown, Rashard Higgins is on the roster. He can make a difference. Robbie Anderson, if he chooses not to retire, which who cares? You have a guy entering year 2 in Terrace Marshall Jr., who I think I was a big fan of coming out the draft last year. He had a pretty solid, I'll say underwhelming rookie season compared to how much he should have played. But ultimately, I think it's more of a getting used to the NFL thing. I think he was definitely a bit, I don't want to say raw coming out, but I think he definitely needed that year of work in 2021 to get himself to what could be a better season in 2022. And then you have a bona fide number one receiver on this team in DJ Moore. And DJ Moore is everything that you could ask for a number one receiver for your quarterback. And then offensive line here, Justin. We're talking about offensive line here in this division. Do the Panthers have a little bit of an argument that their offensive line could actually be the best? Because you look at the guard situation here, they got a couple decent guys. Pat Aflin that they got this past offseason. They have Ike McWono, who they got. They got Taylor Moton, who's been a reliable tackle for them for years. I'm not saying that they definitively are, but the Panthers on paper have a pretty good offensive line compared to some of the other teams in this division. I think that's worth noting.
I agree. I mean,
it's definitely something that I think Carolina, when we talk about them being a surprise team, I think the biggest crux of that is, can the offense perform? Because ultimately, we expect the defense. We expect the defense to do well, right? We expect the defense. It's all on the offense, on what this team's ceiling could really be. And that kind of is the case with most teams like this. We're like, what can the offense do? What can the offense do? But this is literally the biggest, if they can be good, just keep it simple. If they could be good, if they could limit the turnovers, if they could get that running game going, if Christian McCaffrey can be healthy, the Carolina Panthers could actually make a run at a wild card spot in the conference as a whole. So that's really what the case is with them. Justin, you were the one that brought it up, so I will let you begin the analysis here. Can you describe to people how good this defense is? Because this Carolina Panthers defense, I feel some people underrate it. There are some ballers on this team, that's for certain.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't have the roster up in front of me, But I mean, from the bottom out, they've used a ton of first round picks to bolster this defense ever since Luke Kuechly left. It's shown. You know what I mean? Like if they were a not top five, but they're good defense last year, and that was with Sam Darnold kind of collapsing, and then all of a sudden they had a revolving door of quarterbacks that were in there that were sometimes good and sometimes throwing a lot of interceptions. So they still stayed relatively close to the top defensively and defensive efficiency. But people forget, like in the beginning, they were running teams out. I mean, they weren't playing the best teams, but they were running teams out of the stadium because you couldn't score on them. They kept them in the game, and Sam Darnold was doing enough to put them, into positions to win games. So this defense should, in theory, keep this Carolina offense in the game, and it's just going to be a matter of how many points they could put up. I'm not going to say that they're going to win every game defensively, but every game every game they win, outstanding.
Oh yeah, this is certainly a team that you expect the defense to perform, and I just go over some of the names that you kind of alluded to. You got Brian Burns and Yetur Gross-Matos to be there for the pass rush. Over on your defensive tackles, you have guys like Derek Brown and the veteran that they actually picked up. I think this was very underrated, like very under the radar signing, but Matt Ioannidis as a pickup to that defense was very good for them this past offseason. I think the linebacking core, like you could use maybe a little bit more talented names on there, but having the veteran there and Shaq Thompson, who's been around, he's been on that team for a while. He's really the veteran of that linebacking core for this locker room in particular. I think like his leadership there can definitely help them in cases. And then the defensive back crew, it's very interesting because there are a couple young guys there, but we saw some flashes of that defensive back crew the last 2 years. I mean, the safety tandem led by Jeremy Chin. Like he showed some highlight plays, but back in his rookie season, he had a decent enough year too. They acquired CJ Henderson from the Jacksonville Jaguars. And if CJ Henderson can finally put it all together, that's a former, I forget what he exactly was, but I want to say top 10, top 12 pick there. His talent. JC Horn was the number one corner on that team. Really, like he's showed himself to be, I think, a bona fide like number one. And then you have a great veteran there in Dante Jackson as well, and other solid pieces, but really like those three guys by itself, that's a great cornerback room. And then I have a great safety like Jeremy Chin, like the pass rush that they have, the defensive back room that they have, a couple guys who can make some plays. This Carolina Panthers team is very like, I don't want to overuse the word funny. It's overusing the word underrated, but they have real talent on this team. I think of a lot of teams that, I'm sure a lot of people when they place their order of this division, the Panthers are probably going to be third. I think of a lot of the third place divisional teams. This is probably the one that could make the most noise in any given division because that there's so much to work with on this roster.
I don't know about that, but they have a good third. They're a stronger team than people give them credit for. If you're going to compare third place teams in divisions, there's divisions like the AFC North and the NFC West, where I'm just kind of like, in the AFC West, where I'm like, the fourth place team in that division can make some noise. I don't want to compare the Carolina Panthers. Listen, like I said, their defense is good. They have a major question at the quarterback position. Are they going to answer the call? Is Sam Darnold going to be a backup quarterback, or is he going to be someone that can play well in this league? And this is the year where that decision is made. He doesn't get another chance outside of Carolina.
Oh, this 100%.
So is he going to step up? Is he going to be the player that everyone thought he was going to be coming out of college? Or is he going to be, Kerry Collins? Backup. No, listen, like Kerry Collins had a great long career as he was a backup.
True. I mean, he got some spot starts here and there. He got a little bit of starting time here and there in his career. Former Tennessee Titan, him and Vince Young. Dang, that was a story way back in the day, wasn't it, Justin? But okay. To be fair about the whole third place thing, like yes, I was excluding the AFC and the NFC West. I think we know those divisions are just on absolute steroids. Like and I don't literally mean on steroids. I mean like that. Just the talent of that division is just absolutely stacked. So, taking those divisions aside, I think of like we've only done two divisions so far, but I think between these two, I think personally for me, the NFC North, I think the Panthers are a better third place team than whoever your third place team would be in that division. Like the NFC is wide open, and I think there is an opportunity here for Carolina to potentially take over. in place of somebody, all things considered. Wildcard spots are on the line. I think we can guarantee that this season in regards to that. I think we personally have gone through everything that we want to in regards to the Panthers, but I would be remiss, and once again, I will be haunted, taunted, and everything in between and after if we don't get our guys' thoughts. So, Rick, what were you saying about the Panthers for this upcoming season?
So I think the belief with Carolina really depends upon who you see as their quarterback going forward. Whether you think it's still going to be Sam Darnold, whether you think Matt Corral is going to be the quarterback who's going to take over, or if they end up getting Baker Mayfield in a trade that hasn't happened yet. I mean, there's still a lot of volatility on that side. I know Justin likes to talk about this being Matt Rule in the hot seat, and I think he's right, especially considering, this is a team that's very unsettled in that quarterback room. And aside from Christian McCaffrey and a couple good weapons on the receiving core, like a DJ Moore and a Robbie Anderson, there's not really a whole lot on their offense that you can justify as being a strong, talented offensive team. Now, defensively, they added some pieces. I mean, they added Xavier Woods to a secondary that has a really good corner in J.C. Horn. So I think that's going to be a big key for them. Shaq Thompson's also in the linebacking core, so that's going to help them out too. But I feel like this is going to be a case where if you were the Carolina Panthers, this is an interesting year for you. One of your quarterbacks, whichever one it's going to be. I think that's going to be a significant factor for you. I don't see Carolina doing very well this year, and I think you might see Corral towards the middle of the season, kind of like Desmond Ridder in Atlanta. But if Carolina gets Baker Mayfield, and that's a big if, I expect them to do a little bit better than what I'm projecting them to do towards the end.
I mean, there you have it. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Rick said it. Rick summarized everything that we talked about perfectly. I think overall, at the end of the day, the Carolina Panthers, it all depends on the quarterback. And we always talk about the NFL being a quarterback league. And I think in some cases we have that conversation a little bit too much. But I think in this case, it is absolutely right. And I think we have a situation here where you have a supremely talented defense. You have a couple of the weapons that we talked about offensively. I just think overall, I think Carolina is that team, that squad, that really, they are literally a quarterback away from taking that next step. Now, I don't mean, when I say next step, I don't mean that jump from like to a Super Bowl team. What I really mean is that for the organization's perspective, for an organization's thought process on what could be, what the expectation should be, Carolina wants to get from non-playoff team to playoff team. They are a quarterback away from making that jump. And I think Baker Mayfield could be that quarterback. Justin, you missed it. Rick said you were right about Matt Rule. Just tears, brother, tears.
Of course the internet's going to crap out the one time that Rick and I were agreeing on the future of someone. Look, it is what it is. I happen to think Rick's right. So there you go.
Well, you think he's right because he also said you're right about Matt Rule. But no, in all seriousness, like we can go into this roster as much as we want, but ultimately at the end of the day, the number one thing is the quarterback situation. Like as I was talking about there, I think in this game, the quarterback can take you to the next level, whatever your next level could be. And I think for the Panthers, if you want to become a playoff team, you need that quarterback in there. And I know we want to try to give him another season, some people, but I don't think Sam Darnold's that guy. I think, like you said, I think we've seen it.
Whether you think he deserves it or not, he's getting it this year. It's not like they went out and drafted a first-round quarterback. They got Matt Corral in the third round. No offense to Matt Corral, but nobody really liked the quarterbacks in this draft. So you're going to give Sam Darnold his last chance, and you're going to see what you have in Matt Corral when and if that doesn't work out. Maybe you get a little more PJ Walker, but I don't think they're in love with him either. And then realistically, they'll be looking for a top 10 quarterback next year, top 10 pick.
Yeah, very, very, very fair. And I think, will Matt Rule be the coach next season if that is the case?
No, I think they go clean sweep. As much as I could see them being a surprise, I think they go clean sweep this year. After this year.
I mean, I mean that is fair, especially with the offense. Like he already fired Joe Brady, so like coaches typically use their coordinators as the scapegoats for themselves. So he's already fired his offensive coordinator. Has he fired his defensive coordinator yet? Does he have
I
that
don't
card
think
up his
so.
sleeve?
Yeah.
So maybe if the defense underperforms, maybe he could fire the DC. Maybe he could use that to buy himself another season. Like, oh look, the defense didn't play up to expectations. I just get my next guy in there, even though he brought the guy that's already coaching the defense there. But irregardless, semantics aside, as I always like to say and joke about, I think this is definitely a big year for Matt Rule just personally, and I think for this team, like this is a spot that decides things because, like you said, like Carolina. All they need is a quarterback, man. Literally, like I already said, I think sometimes we overstate the quarterback's importance, but literally this time, all they need is a quarterback, and they'll be right as rain.
Pretty much. That's where all the question marks in my mind lie. I mean, look, every team could use more pieces, but if you had to break down the Carolina Panthers into needs, top of that board is quarterback.
Yeah, and typically, and we've seen it, but typically teams that with the number one need being quarterback during the season, and if there's not a good good enough player there already, not a lot of hope that they're going to be able to overcome that. We've seen certain teams here and there overcome it for stretches, but I don't think we're going to see them do that for a full 17 game regular season. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about, through 17 games, what can the Carolina Panthers do and what their ceiling could be. And it's just not that high. Granted, like they should be a competing team. Like they should compete, especially first half of the season. They should look good enough to be a wild card team. And then we'll see if the quarterback play either drops off or maybe Sam Darnold finally takes that next step. As unlikely as that might be. Maybe he finally takes that next step for this organization. And Matt Rule can finally be like, "Ooh, I'm safe, and I can finally get this Justin guy to stop talking about my job security."
I was going to say, can you imagine Sam Darnold just lights it up this year?
I mean, that would be amazing.
Yeah. I love Sam. He didn't work out in New York, but I got no hard feelings against him.
Right.
If he could light it up in Carolina, all the power to him.
Right. I mean, hard to hold it against a guy when he had to deal with Adam Gase. I mean, literally only Peyton Manning has made Adam Gase look good.
Not much has made Adam Gase look good.
Yep. True. As a head coach, very true. Yeah. So moving on from the bottom half of the division now, let us go to the top two teams. I think it's safe to say we'll go from, I mean, we're kind of going in a certain order if you all can tell at this point, spoilers, but let's just go with the team that we're expecting to potentially compete to the top of the division and maybe could make a surprise, all things depending if it breaks. The New Orleans Saints, Justin. For a couple seasons now, the Saints have had cap issues, to say the least. They've had to make a lot of cuts. They've had to make a lot of roster changes to this team the last couple of years in terms of letting guys go and having to replenish. They even had to make a coaching change as Sean Payton decided to step away, and Dennis Allen now takes over as the head coach. Me personally, I think that even with them keeping the offensive coaching staff, I think it'll be noticeable, without Sean Payton there. But irregardless, New Orleans Saints, of course, we all agree they are the top challenger to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in this division. You think of if he is back healthy this season, and it's a big if considering the last couple of years, but if Michael Thomas can be back for this team, and he can look to be a number one caliber receiver again, I think that he's one of the best receivers in this division, obviously. You look at they traded up to get Chris Olave. Chris Olave could end up making a really big impact in his rookie campaign. I think obviously that is the expectation for him to make that impact, to be that definitive number two that they haven't had in a long time in New Orleans. There are pieces there, obviously, and I feel like I've kind of said that a lot about the Panthers, but I think particularly for the Saints, because they were close to the playoffs last year, it was up until the final game of the regular season that eliminated them, because the San Francisco 49ers won that wild comeback game against the Los Angeles Rams in the final week of the season. Like that's what it took to eliminate the Saints from the playoffs last year. So the Saints are technically a playoff level team. They just ended up not making it last year. I already know the answer to this, Justin, but I want you to detail it to the people. What is going to be the biggest factor this season onto what the Saints' success in 2022 will be?
The health of Jameis Winston. Look, they were an even better team last year when Jameis was healthy. I mean, he's still Jameis Winston, but they have an excellent defense. They've added to this excellent defense. Yeah, they did lose Marcus Williams, but as we heard a couple weeks ago in the Would You Rather, they added Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus May, two really good prime of their career safeties. So they should be excellent over the top. They should be able to get after the quarterback. They're a great team. They're a great all around team. They even losing Teron Armstead to the Dolphins didn't do anything. They drafted a tackle to replace him, who I happen to think is going to have a very good year this year. So it's going to be, how many games is Kamara suspended? Because I think that he will miss some time. And can Jameis stay healthy and not turn the ball over as much as he did, in his last full season in Tampa? If that's the case, and he can really sling it like we know he can, they should at the very least be a wild card favorite, in my opinion. I have them making the playoffs this year. I don't have them beating the Buccaneers, but I have it being a way closer than a lot of people think. As we'll see later, I think the Bucs got a little bit worse, and I think the Saints actually got a little bit better.
Right. I mean, hey, I don't think you're wrong. I think I ultimately do believe that even with some of the losses that they have had recently, I think New Orleans, of course, is the top challenger. I think they should be considered a playoff team by many going into the season. Yes, the NFC West is deep. And yes, like we talked about, there could be some surprise teams. Of course, that'll be later on as we continue to go. There could be a couple surprises here and there in regards to that. But I think ultimately when it comes to the Saints as a whole, regarding what their ceiling is, it's exactly what you said. It's just health on this team. I think unlike the Panthers, where the quarterback situation is the make or break, I don't think to an extent it's not as make or break, because I think this team is good enough to where an average or slightly above average quarterback can really do them good. Whereas I think the Carolina Panthers, I think you need a guy who can play a bit better than just slightly above average. I think on this team, yes, he's going to be suspended a bit, but the running game can really be a factor with Alvin Kamara when he's back. The receiving core is there for this team as a whole. You have the ultimate weapon. Justin, how dare you? How dare that you forget the ultimate weapon on this team in Taysom Hill? And you get, I was talking about the Carolina Panthers offensive line. I think maybe this could actually be the better offensive line on paper for the New Orleans Saints. You have a Trevor Penning, you have a Ryan Ramczyk being the bookend tackles. That in and of itself is good. You got a couple great interior offensive linemen, Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz on this team. You got that defense that you talked about. You have Tyrann Mathieu, you have Marcus May as a safety. You didn't even mention that the number one corner on this team is one of the best number one corners in the game today, and that is Marshawn Lattimore. You have that decent linebacking core. It's not, eye-popping, but it's decent. They could get the job done. And then pass rushing unit, which it has Cameron Jordan there. Marcus Davenport had a really good year for himself last season. That was very big for this organization to have. They're going to expect other pieces to stand up. But the thing is that somehow, some way, the New Orleans Saints, they tend to just get guys going, and guys can have good seasons. Remember, it was Trey Hendrickson a couple of years ago that had that big season before he ends up going to Cincinnati Bengals and gets that big contract. Guys will step up for this team in certain spots. That's just how it goes for the Saints. They can get someone on one side of the ball or the other to have a really good year for them. And I think that is a very big telling sign for an organization and how good they could be. And I think, again, for me, my ultimate thing with what the Saints could be is Sean Payton. I think that his absence makes a big deal. I think just the presence of Sean Payton, again, even if you still have the same coaching staff, I think Sean Payton not being there is a big deal. I think that Sean Payton's just offensive mind and presence is going to be missed along that sideline. I think it's going to be a bigger factor than most are giving it. I don't think that's going to break them necessarily, because I think for Dennis Allen, this is a really good second head coaching opportunity for himself that I will not deny. But I think there'll be a couple games next season where you look at it as dang, if Sean Payton was there. Because again, Sean Payton, he was very special in terms of how he could scheme up the offense. That offense, to me, overperformed last season for Jameis being out early, for Michael Thomas being out the whole year, basically. Stuff like that. Sean Payton can help you overcome. Dennis Allen, yes, even with the same coaching staff, will he be able to overcome that? Too, at least for me, is a big question going into this season. We've given our analysis. We, of course, per usual, have another man. What were Rick's thoughts about this team? I think they might surprise you a little bit because, Justin's given his praise, but I think Rick also has some high hopes for the Saints going to 2022 as well.
The Saints added a very good number of pieces to their team this year. Jarvis Landry on the offense, Marcus May, and Tyrann Mathieu on the defense. the biggest change I think for them is that Dennis Allen's now their head coach. And that's going to be a culture changer because Sean Payton had a very strong way of how he was the coach for the Saints. And it's going to be interesting to see if the team buys in. Now, on that offensive side, if you're telling me that you've got the Swiss Army knife Taysom Hill along with Landry and Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram, Chris Olave, and a returning Michael Thomas, it's a phenomenal offense for New Orleans as long as Jameis Winston proves to be the quarterback that he can be as the number 1 overall pick from his draft class. I think that's going to be the big question mark. If Winston can be the guy, I think this is going to be a very good team. And I actually have New Orleans doing very well this year. I think they're a sleeper that a lot of pundits are going to pick as like an underdog pick. But they're a very good team with a very good defensive set. It's going to be fun to watch Chris Richard in his first year as co-defensive coordinator really helping out the secondary. That's also got guys like Bradley Roby and Paulson Adebo on that secondary side in the corners. So I think New Orleans is going to really give teams fits, and I honestly can't wait to see how they play against Tampa Bay. I think with the corners that they have and with all their defense that's there, they might give Tom Brady a little bit of trouble here. And I think New Orleans is going to be a very trendy upset pick for NFC South champion because of all the weapons together. I don't know if it's going to happen per se, but I think it's a very trendy pick possibly.
I mean, he brings up a real point, Justin. You alluded to it, but the Saints are a real pick to be an upset to be the upset favorite to potentially win the NFC South, and I think that they deserve it. You know, they deserve to be that upset pick because they have the talent there. They have the veteran head coach Dennis Allen. Yes, again, of course, I know I noted that his first time as head coach didn't necessarily work out well, but it still matters to have a guy there with some experience ultimately on the sideline, and I think that, Jameis Winston, if he can be healthy, I have my thoughts about Jameis. I think there are a couple cases here and there ultimately where he certainly hurts your team. But I think, with the basis that was established with him getting the start last season, with how much time that he spent on that team and how good he got and how good he looked, I think there is a more than real chance that with Jameis being the quarterback there, and if he plays good enough, and when we say good enough, we don't necessarily mean like, and Justin, I think you clarify this to the people, we don't have like Jameis has to throw 35 touchdowns and just 12 interceptions and stuff like that. We're not expecting that. But if Jameis can show just some of what we have seen in his Tampa tenure, the guy who threw for 30 passing touchdowns in the season, who threw for, it was close to or above, or pretty close to 5K yards, or maybe even past that. Like, if he shows a little bit of that, that's going to be a big difference for what the Saints season could be.
Absolutely. I mean, look, there's very few the best seasons, in my opinion, quarterback-wise ever, were Aaron Rodgers when he would throw 40 touchdowns and like 8 interceptions. And as fantastic as he was, how many of those seasons did he win a Super Bowl? Because he's done it 3 times and he's only won 1. So, yeah, I mean, it's great. It'd be fantastic. I don't see how the Saints lose if he does that. I don't think he's going to. If he has a 30 touchdown season and throws for 5,000 yards and under 15 picks, they're a playoff team, hands down. It's going to be, how can they capitalize on this great defense and excellent run game, and can Jameis keep them in position to win instead of hurting them and shooting them in the foot?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Hey, look, if Jameis puts anywhere near those numbers, like, forget just playoff team, like they may even be a real contender because, again, we talked about what this defense can do. You have, the force on the defensive line in Cam Jordan, who is like, he has been a presence on that team for so long. Again, I made note of it before, but Marcus Davenport, to me, Justin, I think he had his first really good season last year. I think he could take a step even further to help out this New Orleans Saints team. I just think there is... this team has the pieces to really make that difference. It's going to be all about Michael Thomas if he can finally come back, Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara. Like when he has to come back, if they can all fit together well with Jameis, and if Dennis Allen can really put it all together in his rebirth as a head coach, I think that'll be big. Because here's the thing, Justin. I think you can at least for me, I think Sean Payton helped this team a lot. Especially the last 4, 5, 6 years or so, when Drew Brees' arm talent wasn't what it was, when Jameis Winston, when he looked good last season. Like, I think Sean Payton really helped make a difference. yes, Dennis Allen and Rick kind of alluded to it. It's going to be a bit of a culture change, but like the impact that I think Dennis Allen can have on this team, I think is going to be a big deal. What do you think from Dennis Allen being the coach? How do you think he can help, keep keep things going? I think is the big question that is on a lot of people's minds, really, when it comes to what 2022 could be for the New Orleans Saints. I think that is at least for me, that's going to be arguably equal to or bigger than what Jameis Winston could end up doing this upcoming season, how that's going to impact what could happen over in New Orleans. I think to me, if Dennis Allen can show that he grew as a coach from when he got that chance with the Raiders, if he can really show himself to be a lot better with it, I think for my money, that's going to be the big difference for what their season could be. So Justin, what do you think? Like, how can Dennis Allen really help make sure that this team can be that certified playoff team this year?
Well, he's got to have, good, safe, conservative play calling, but he's got to, make sure that he's not putting his players in a bad position. Like, this is where coaching for me is so underrated because, yeah, they're not on the field, but good coaches put their players in position to make the right plays. So, like, not every quarterback is going to be able to read every single defense every time. You need to say, all right, I see the two safeties dropping, or I see this linebacker is going to come up and blitz. Recognize the play call, recognize the situation you're in, and call the right plays to make sure that your players are prepared to make the plays when you need it most. And Dennis Allen's got it. I don't expect him to, be that ballsy Sean Payton type, coming out of the second half in the Super Bowl with an onside kick. But I do expect him to, he's got to combine that little bit of balls with the correct play calling and conservative play calling. And I don't expect him to take a ton of risks this year. I expect him to sit back on his heels, let his players do what they're paid to do, and just a few safe play calls. And if you really need to go out of the box, you'll see it late in games. You won't see it early on.
I definitely agree with you there. I think, and I'm on the side. I think a good coach can really make the difference for a team, and that's why I've pointed out Sean Payton and what his absence could mean for the team. That's why it's been such a big deal for me personally overall. So, but I'm definitely with you. I think Dennis Allen. I maybe would have preferred a more offensive oriented coach, but I think Dennis Allen could be the guy there if he can continue the smart play calling. And like you said, I think they're going to be smart with Jameis early on, especially if Alvin Kamara's not there. They're really going to have to make sure that the running game can help. And I think Michael Thomas and Chris Olave going to get a lot of targets early. I think like the two of them, it's going to be a steady diet of those two just carrying this team offensively early on into the season and what that ultimately could look like. But I'm on the same boat as everybody. I think the New Orleans Saints are for sure like the team to threaten the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in this division for this upcoming season. And maybe they could end up winning the division. Who knows? Like they've had Tampa Bay's number in the regular season the last couple of years. So who's to say that can continue? Speaking of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the final team that we haven't got to yet in our NFC South division breakdown here on the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast is the, 2 years ago, Super Bowl champions, team that lost to the eventual Super Bowl champions in this year's playoffs in the NFL divisional round, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was a very tumultuous offseason. We're getting into that detail. I'm not going to waste any time. I want our guys' analysis here right away. What Rick had to say about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think, is going to illuminate and really get the conversation going for a lot of what we're thinking about for Tampa Bay in 2022, ladies and gentlemen. So, Rick, what do you got?
Tampa Bay's offseason was a yo-yo. It was a pendulum, really. They didn't know if they had Tom Brady, and then they had Tom Brady. And because they had Tom Brady, they lost Bruce Arians, and they got Todd Bowles. So it's really been kind of a crazy offseason for them. But in getting Tom Brady back, they got a lot of free agents that came to the room. Russell Gage, one of them, is a wide receiver, kind of really helping shore up that room along with Mike Evans and Vincent Smith, as well as Rashad Perriman, and one of the top 5 tight ends in the game in Cameron Brate, plus their running back room of Leonard Fournette and Gio Bernard are really going to help Tom Brady out this season. On defense, the Buccaneers were strong once again. Linebacking core of KJ Britt, Devin White, Levante David, and a shout out to Brooklyn's own Olukunle Fatukasi, an undrafted player out of Rutgers who made it all the way from Grand Street campus in Brooklyn. So props to him for doing that, and he's on Tampa Bay. In the cornerback room, you've got Carlton Davis and Keanu Neal along with Antoine Winfield Jr. So I think Tampa Bay is going to make this division super easy. But I think you could see some games where the Buccaneers struggle a little bit on offense. I think that might be Todd Bowles. It's his second stint as a head coach, his first year with the Bucks. He may have a little bit of trouble with, Tom Brady and understanding, some of like the offensive little niches and hitches here and there. So I feel like Tampa Bay could have a bit of trouble in the early going before they really kick it in high gear. And of course, I'm still on Gronk watch. I think Rob Gronkowski's going back to the Buccaneers too. I think Tampa Bay is the class of this division. I think there's no question about it in my mind. But I do see them having some trouble with New Orleans in some games here or there. I just think that their schedule is also really, really interesting because you get the Rams and you get the Packers on their schedule. There are some really choice games that are there with Tom Brady going up against Aaron Rodgers and the defending Super Bowl champions as well. So I think it's going to be a really interesting test for Tom Brady this season. And this could be his last year. I know we said it last year and we said it the year before that and the year before that, but I feel like this may be a chance for Brady to really understand his position and see where he is. Make an easier decision from there.
He hit it out the park. I don't even know where to begin when it comes to the analysis on Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think ultimately, of course, it started with the most important decision that was made was that after Tom Brady had quote unquote retired, which I think we need to revisit that story here on the podcast because I don't think we ever really got the chance to talk about it, if I'm not mistaken. And I think we need to just revisit what that whole ordeal was and how it involved other things that eventually broke later on in this offseason. But Tom Brady coming out of retirement was a massive deal for this team because that really, it helped them cap-wise because there would have been the cap hit on the team with him being retired. And, he came back and restructured that thing, his contract, as he usually does, in order to help the team. Now, they had already lost a couple pieces. They lost Alex Kappa. He left to the Cincinnati Bengals. Ali Marpet retired. Ryan Jensen, who knows what it could have been. I'm sure he got plenty of offers. Maybe he was considered. Actually, no, I think he was ultimately going to end up staying. Well, not staying with Tampa. I mean, just staying and playing and would have gotten a contract elsewhere. But Brady coming back immediately right away, he stayed. So that helped at least keep him along with the bookend tackles on that team in Tristan Wirfs and Donovan Smith. But then there was still the gaping hole in one of the guard spots. They were able to fill that with the acquisition of Shaq Mason from the New England Patriots, which I think was a massive deal for the team, for them to help fix the interior offensive line woes for them. I think, once Brady came back, dominoes started to fall into place, and you got Leonard Fournette staying and being back in the fold and what he could do with that team. Giovanni Bernard being there, he could make the difference. Keyshawn Vaughn maybe could actually have could make an impact on this team for all we know. Like that's the thing with just Brady in general, is that what he can do with pieces around him that aren't necessarily optimal. And I think that's going to be the case this year with what the running back situation will be. Wide receiver, of course, Chris Godwin getting hurt at the end of the year. Not ideal. It definitely hampered them in the playoffs. I would have to double check. I don't know how much time he's going to miss in terms of the regular season. I would imagine because he got late. He got injured so late into last season that I think I think the expectation is that he's going to miss some of the start of this regular season. So you need Mike Evans to continue to be the number one receiver who's had 1,000+ yards in every single season of his career so far. You made the acquisition for Russell Gage in the offseason, which I think was a great acquisition. Atlanta definitely is going to miss him. He would have been a nice piece there for the skilled position group. Him just going to Tampa, I think that's just another weapon. I think he's going to have a really good year for them. And you still got a couple of guys there that have some experience. You got Rashad Perriman and Scotty Miller there, that just vertical threats. Maybe a guy like a Tyler Johnson could make a difference in this lineup. Like, you just really, when it comes to actually the veteran John Brown is also on this team as well, looking at the roster. So I think overall with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you have a very, very interesting situation that offensively it was looking very murky, but everything started to fall back into place with Brady's return. And that's why it was such a big deal for him to ultimately come back, and it kept a couple guys there, got some guys going. Of course, Russell Gage sharing the story of the text that he got from Brady. I think a lot of that, just him coming back really helped fix what this team's offseason was looking like. And of course, them making that trade for Shaq Mason, which still don't understand what the Patriots were doing there. I think Tampa's offseason, kind of like Rick said, it started very because I mean, we'll get into it defensively. There's still some pieces, there's still some questions now on the defensive side of things, but I think Tom Brady, of course, Tom Brady fixes all, ladies and gentlemen. He just does. And him coming back definitely worked that out. And then the Bruce Arians to Todd Bowles change of power, that succession plan, full confidence from Bruce to Todd Bowles and what he could do potentially with this team. You still got Byron Leftwich there to be the offensive coordinator. We know that Brady has done really good work with him so far. Like, it's just a lot of good things went Tampa Bay's way, I think, offensively. And Todd Bowles, again, this is just another guy that he gets a second. We're talking quite a few guys that we're talking about here that are getting just the last two between Dennis Allen and Todd Bowles, who defensive guys who are getting the second chance with a pretty good offensive core of guys around to work with. And you have Bowles now getting to work with Brady, as the head coach, getting the skill position group that he has. I think like he's going to let Byron Leftwich do his thing, but Todd Bowles definitely, like, this is the best quarterback he's ever worked with, without question, in his time as a head coach so far. You think back to what the Jets tenure was and how that was a situation, to say the very least. He got rookie Sam Darnold, he had Bryce Petty, he had Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think Todd Bowles it's looking really good for him now that he is the greatest of all time there. But kind of like Rick alluded to, and going back to this point, what the offseason was. So offensively, the offseason really took that 180 when Brady returned. Defensively, not so much. And they did add a couple pieces to this defense, relatively speaking, and kept some guys. They were able to keep their personal number one corner, Carlton Davis, on the team. They added Logan Hall in the draft. I think that was a relatively good pickup for them. They got Hakeem Hicks to help fill out the defensive tackle spot on this team. Hakeem Hicks, last season had a decent year for Chicago. Didn't show what he was in 17-18 when he combined for 16 sacks in between those two seasons. But ultimately speaking, still a very good defensive tackle to help solidify things there, along with Vita Vea. I think the two of them are going to be really good. But let's kind of talk about it. The defense is really where this team is kind of lacking right now, because, the linebacking core is still good. Levante David and Devin White, as long as you have those two beasts up the middle, your linebacking core is going to be set and solid. Levante David missed a little bit of time last year. I think even when he came back, he kind of looked dinged up. So I think you hope for him to, a full healthy season. Relatively speaking, he'll look a lot better. He'll play a lot better. I think linebacking core will be good there. It's the other two levels of this defense I have to look at. And really, unlike last year, I think this year the question is not so much on the secondary. Still some questions about the secondary. But I think the defensive line has more questions on it this season. And again, let's just look at it. So you were able to get Carlton Davis. They made that addition in the offseason to get for themselves Keanu Neal, who we know has the flexibility to also play linebacker, as we saw in Dallas last season. But, even aside from, you hope Sean Murphy-Bunting can make a difference on this team, and really, really step up and be even take a bigger role defensively as a corner. They got the veteran Logan Ryan, who has history with Tom Brady, of course, being a former New England Patriot. You have Antoine Winfield Jr. I think the defensive back crew could be a little bit better, but I think as long as they don't get hurt, because people forget they were getting decimated by some injuries last year, I think the defensive back crew for this team is going to be good. Defensive line is my biggest question here, because in terms of pass rushers from that Super Bowl run, think about it. Shaq Barrett, Jason Pierre-Paul, and Ndamukong Suh, they were just absolutely crushing it there. Of course, as were Levante David and Devin White, but those three, in terms of the front four, were making a difference. And Ndamukong Suh's not on the team anymore. Jason Pierre-Paul's not on the team anymore. They're both free agents now still. And you have Shaq Barrett, who still good. He had a double-digit sack season last year. He's going to make a difference, but you're hoping and you're thinking that a lot of guys need to step up and they need to take that next level for you in terms of pass rush. And that's my big concern here, because we've already kind of detailed it, but Carolina has a relatively fine offensive line. New Orleans Saints, once again, I've already retracted my previous statement, but I think the best offensive line in the division easily goes to the New Orleans Saints right now on paper, just with what they have. You got to get to the quarterback. And I think, when it comes to their top competition in the division in particular, that's going to be a struggle. But then, and this was the underrated thing. I know we haven't talked too much about it with the other teams, but I think specifically with Tampa, this is where it comes into play, because you losing a couple pieces from that championship defense from a couple years ago. This is just the first 4 weeks of the season. At Dallas, at New Orleans, home against Green Bay, home against Kansas City. That's 4 playoff teams there. And 2 out of those 4 are Super Bowl contenders. 1 out of those 4 always likes to say they were Super Bowl contender, but let's be real here. 2 out of those 4 are definitive Super Bowl contenders. Then you get a couple easier games with the Falcons on the docket. You get the Kansas City the Pittsburgh Steelers are in that the first 6 games for them. Then you get the Carolina Panthers. It really will depend on how they look at that point. You get the Baltimore Ravens there. You're going to have to try to guard against Lamar Jackson. That's never easy for you. And then you got the Los Angeles Rams, the Cleveland Browns, depending on what that could be. You got the Saints after the Browns, and then you got to end the season. This is the last 5 games. Well, last 2 games are Falcons, Panthers, but then before that, the 3 games before that, it's at San Francisco early in December, at home against Cincinnati, and on Christmas Day, of course, as we went over a while back in terms of primetime games, at Arizona. Well, technically speaking, at Arizona. I believe that might be one of the games that is at a different arena, or is that the San Fran game? I don't know. the offseason is such a blur at this point, ladies and gentlemen. But the point being that Tampa Bay, they are the favorites. Brady will make them the favorites. They should be the favorites. But I think New Orleans has a legitimate chance to catch them. And I will say this right now, I actually would not be surprised if the New Orleans Saints end up being the top team in the NFC South this season. It just wouldn't surprise me, because I think you look at this team, yes, they got Brady back. Yes, they still got some great weapons there. But that defense, to me, on paper, looks like they took a step back. And I think that is a massive deal for this team as a whole. I think them not being fully what they were from previous seasons, even last year when they didn't go as far, you still had those pieces there. No Jason Pierre-Paul, no Ndamukong Suh. I think that makes a big difference. You need the defensive back crew to hopefully stay healthy this year. And if they do end up getting hurt again, this is the thing. At the end of the day, like, yes, division injuries suck, but you have to be able to overcome that to an extent. And can you overcome that, I think, is the biggest question of them all when it regards the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And do you have the confidence in what the depth on this team is? That's a big question that, it's a wait and see, and hopefully you don't have to see, because hopefully they do end up staying healthy. But I think defensively is where they could end up taking that step back here, because again, that pass rush is not the same as what it was. If Shaq Mason can, no, not Shaq Mason, excuse me, that's offensive line. Shaq Barrett can look like he did a couple of years back, what his first season in Tampa was, I believe, in that 18.5 sack season. If he could get closer to that, which I think he might actually have to, play up to that level, really, for this pass rush to look that good. I think you're asking a lot from him. Levante David and Devin White, of course, all the confidence in the world, but just on paper, and we just heard the murderer's row of teams that they're going to have to go through. There's a lot of playoff teams, a couple Super Bowl contenders there early on. You're asking a lot of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to be able to overcome a lot of things. Yes, of course, Brady always helps you, but it's going to get to the point where you need more. And we saw that last year in the playoff game that, yes, they mounted that furious comeback. Yes, Brady was there once again. He is the ultimate boogeyman for everybody, but you saw that at the end of the day, they needed something more, and they needed a defensive play to be made, and Cooper Kupp just destroyed them. So that's why, yes, Brady coming back, of course, helps. I don't think we would, granted, they would have made a change at quarterback, but I don't think we would think of them as the favorite in this division without him, of course. But now you need more. And I have a lot of doubts in my mind personally if this defense can do enough of the job. I think for me, that is ultimately what my mindset is in regards to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and how things are going there for them in the grand scheme of things for 2022. Again, I think Brady, having the skill position group still be strong, I think is going to be a big deal, because I think you need guys to be able to step up for Tampa Bay offensively. I think you're going to need Leonard Fournette to really have I don't even know what to call it. It wouldn't be a breakout year. It would be maybe more of a resurgence year. I think he's going to really be the bell cow back for them this upcoming season. I think he's going to have to take on a really big role shouldering that running game. He could pass catch a little bit, but he needs to be that just absolute brute physical runner that could just mow people down. I think he can do that for them for this season in particular. I think the setup could potentially be there for Leonard Fournette to have a big year. Mike Evans has been Mr. Consistent when Chris Godwin comes back. Chris Godwin was phenomenal last season, and I think his absence made a difference. And I think when he's back in the lineup, it's going to take him a couple weeks, most likely, when he gets back. But Chris Godwin has looked amazing since Brady got there, and he continues to just be absolutely, just a beast. And him being back in the lineup will certainly make more than just a difference. It'll be a big reason as to why Tampa Bay is going to be able to hold on and maintain things. And I think some of the depth pieces, I think you need a couple guys to step up. I mentioned some of the running backs earlier, but Vaughn could definitely end up playing a role for this team. Giovanni Bernard, maybe. You have Russell Gage, who could, he could potentially have a big breakout year for himself personally. I think Tampa Bay's offensive players stepping up is going to be what helps them out here. I think the offense, unlike a couple of previous cases where we're talking about what the defense has to do, I think that in regards to Tampa's outlook, you need the offense to carry the defense here. Whereas we talked about the defense could really help out the Saints in some games. Talk about the defense and what they'll do for the Carolina Panthers. You need it's a complete opposite here, where you need to rely on the offense of a team to ultimately take that next step and to help out a team at the end of the day, help out the defense of the team at the end of the day for them to be competitive. And look, if you are going to rely on a single man to carry your offense, to help it when the defense is struggling, you want the greatest quarterback of all time to be there. And I think that is going to be the ultimate difference maker for Tampa. And I know I just said all that, and I do still have these concerns, but just barely, I personally have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as my winner in this division for the upcoming 2022 campaign. I think it's going to be a massive deal overall for the Buccaneers to end up winning the division again. I think it is critical that they're able to get the division, because we've seen, in the past what a wild card spot could mean, and not getting close to the first round bye. And I think Tampa, I think there's a chance that they're really going to go for it this season. I think that there is a belief and a mindset on this team that they want to go back to the Super Bowl, because when Brady's there, of course, you get the confidence that you are a Super Bowl team. I think Brady's presence there is going to motivate a lot of these guys to try to bring up to that next level. And I think with Todd Bowles getting his second chance as a coach here, I think, that rapport that he has with those guys, especially the defense. I think if there is a chance that this defense can overperform, I think it's because Todd Bowles is, still there and can still make a difference. And I just think that's a massive deal. I think that's just a massive deal into what Tampa's 2022 campaign could end up looking like. I think for Bruce Arians giving it over to Todd Bowles, I think that's going to be important for what the defense can perform as. And I think just offensively, Byron Leftwich, the dude has made a case for himself, I think, the last season or two to get more head coaching opportunities and to be in that conversation. And he could have ended up being the guy that Bruce Arians could have named as his successor. Of course, Arians going Todd Bowles. I don't necessarily think that was the wrong choice per se, but I think that Brady and Leftwich are going to once again look great. I believe Clyde Christensen is still there. He's one of the best quarterback coaches in the game. Like that dude, and the difference he has made to quarterback rooms has just been phenomenal. I think that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as I've said, with their flaws, and maybe they'll actually be a team that, they could go after maybe late here in the offseason if there's a pass rusher that they think they could pick up or nab, or if it's later in the season, maybe towards the trade deadline, maybe we could actually see Tampa be really aggressive with a move, which I definitely think could be in the cards. And I think Brady, we know that the organization has wanted him to have a voice. I think there is a real chance that Brady could make an impact at the trade deadline and say, like, hey, I think we need a little bit more on this team. And if he gives his input, you best believe that the general manager will do all he can to make that happen for him, because that's been a big deal as to why it's worked in Tampa, that Brady has felt his voice be heard more. I think that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, despite some of the flaws, I think they have the structure in place to help them overcome that. And I think that is something we don't talk about enough with organizations. I think structure is a big deal in regards to that. And I really do believe that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as a whole will be able to overcome whatever their flaws are and can just barely take the NFC South. So I have the Bucs taking the NFC South for myself. If I had to kind of guess a record, I would say pretty close to what they were last season. I would say 11-6, maybe 12-5. I think the New Orleans Saints are likely going to be a 10-win team this year. I think they definitely have that ability and potential. So I would say 10 wins is a fair expectation for New Orleans. The Panthers are my third place, and the Falcons are my fourth place team. I just think the Falcons, like we talked about earlier in the episode, just Atlanta's there's not a lot for them to look at. I think Arthur Smith, he's going to get a year or two here for them to really go over this, because I think last season with Matt Ryan still being there, I think the situation has changed, and I think like the ownership group needs to be fair to this current core, and they need to give them the opportunity to be able to rebuild here. So I think Arthur Smith is going to get a year here to see what Desmond Ridder could do. Eventually, once again, when Ridder gets that chance to see with Drake London and Kyle Pitts and what they could accomplish there. So I don't have a lot of expectations for Atlanta. maybe a couple wins here and there, but nothing much. And again, the Carolina Panthers all depends on the quarterback situation. Now, I guess my hot take was that I think they're a really good third place team compared to a lot of teams, completely forgetting the West divisions apparently in the AFC North. But I do think on paper, at least, the Carolina Panthers have a real shot at making something happen. But again, just all depends on the quarterback situation, what happens there. And I don't really know what you can say, because I think Baker Mayfield would make the difference, but we've seen reports the last couple of days. When are they going to make that move is ultimately what the big question is. And I think if you're Carolina, it's something you need to make that decision now, because before you ultimately get into training camp, I think like having Baker there, getting him the playbook early, I think that would make a really big deal as to him being able to have a good debut campaign for the Panthers. So I think if you are Carolina, if you're thinking about making a quarterback move, you need to make that move now. And if it is Baker, you need to trade for him now so he can start getting used to the guys, maybe train a little bit here in a later portion of the offseason with these guys before training camp. Get him the playbook, let him and Matt will communicate, get a feel for each other. Like if you're Carolina and you want to take the season seriously, if this is really a big time season for you, you need to make this move, and you need to make it soon. Like that to me ultimately is the big deal for the Panthers for this upcoming season. I think if you're making that quarterback move, just make it now. And hey, if you're going to stick with Sam Darnold, more power to you. I hope for Sam. I have so many Jets fans that I know. I have so many Jets fans that I talk to that they wish the best for Sam. I think if Sam is going to make something happen, he really needs to take that big leap. That's what to say. Now, Justin, I just gave a whole rant. Welcome back. I just gave a whole rant right there. I gave my analysis on Tampa. I gave my predictions already, brother. So I will restate them just for you. But I got the Buccaneers as my first seed, but just barely. I got the Saints as my second seed. I got the Panthers as my third seed, and I got the Falcons as my fourth seed in the NFC South. Now, I'm going to let you say all of your stuff, of course, but this was my thing ultimately as to why I think Tampa, I have them as my winner, Justin, but I think it's extremely close because I think the defense could take a step back because no Jason Pierre-Paul, no Ndamukong Suh. I think the defensive back crew is solid, but they still need a little bit more there. And the linebacking core is fine. I think if Tampa's going to falter anywhere, I think it's going to be defensively personally. I think that's going to be the big flaw for this team. And Rick, his mindset was he has the Buccaneers as a favorite, but his whole thing for them is the schedule. So all that factored in, what are your thoughts on Tampa Bay going into 2022?
They should win their division at the very least. Look, as long as they have Tom Brady there and all of those weapons, they should, in theory, be a contender to win the whole thing. I fully expect him to at least make the playoffs and win their division. But I think it's not as such a given as everyone is making it out to be. When I went through the schedules and, without specifics on who's winning what, I had my prediction around 10 or 11 games for the Bucs, and I had the Saints at 9 or 10. I think it's going to be that close. It could come down to, the last couple of weeks of the season in which, Tampa Bay needs to win, a game or two to really solidify and guarantee that win. But I think they've lost pieces. Look, I don't think they've gotten better on their secondary, which was a major hole and issue last year with all their injuries and old players. And then they lost starters. They lost guys that were there that, played for them and were, major contributors. And now all of a sudden their weakest thing just got weaker. I don't think their defensive line is as good, with no Ndamukong Suh, no JPP. They did sign Akeem Hicks. I believe they drafted a pass rusher, but I don't see them being as dominant, as a team as they were a year or two ago. So it's going to be interesting to see where they make up these deficits. It's also going to be a newly coached team with Todd Bowles. I mean, I don't expect a ton of differences, but it's not the same coach.
Right.
So all of these major differences, along with a kind of a fleeing of talent on the defensive end, I don't think that they're going to be like the guaranteed NFC South winners.
Right.
Again,
real quick, just, to go back on Bowles, because I also touched a bit upon that. And, if there is a chance that this defense could overperform, I think the familiarity with Todd Bowles would be it. Do you think Bowles being the head, maybe not necessarily just being the head coach, but do you think he can help that defense, mask a couple of issues of it? Not like every single game, but here and there. because he has shown he can work with that defense really well. Like those guys have a rapport with him.
Listen, I think Todd Bowles is an excellent coach. I think he'll do well as the head coach in Tampa Bay, but some things you just can't mask. Like I said, I don't think that they got better defensively, and they had some major issues. That's really where they lost last year, was not being able to stop guys from throwing over the top. So, I mean, I know again it's something they addressed in the draft. I don't think that they're going to be able to scheme a bad secondary. It's just they don't have the horses to get after the quarterback like they did. And that's how they did it. They said we don't have the best secondary, but we're going to get after you. You're not going to run the ball, and we're going to put your quarterback on his ass. Their top defensive players are another year older. We're not on the team anymore, and they're really going to have to outscore people or hope that they can't complete that. They just don't have a good passing game, which they'll win a few games that way for sure. But I don't see them being that dominant team that they were, and you'll have to rely on an ever aging immortal Tom Brady to make up those deficits. Listen, there's a reason he led the league in touchdowns and passing last year. He's still there. He still got it. He can win games that way. Can he make it all the way? At what is he, 43 now? Can he make it all the way to the promised land that way? It remains to be seen. I don't think we've ever seen a quarterback that age do it that way. I mean, even when Peyton Manning won his last Super Bowl, they were right. He was throwing ducks, insanely accurate ducks.
He wasn't even 40 yet. He was 39. Like this is even older.
He was throwing ducks, and while his accuracy didn't fade, he didn't have the velocity on the ball. So they won that game on defense. Von Miller was the driving force of that Super Bowl team.
Super Bowl MVP,
yeah.
So
I see them cutting it close, a little too close for comfort for a lot of Bucs fans who've reveled in the glory of the past few years of Tom Brady. But we'll see. I think the Saints team, depending on their health and availability of certain players, I think they can really challenge, which would be very surprising for a lot of teams this year. We'll see how hot they get out of the gate too, because the Bucs have a tough schedule coming out.
Yes, yeah, we detailed that, like their first 4 games. It's like there's the Cowboys to open the season. They got the Packers and the Chiefs in there. Like there's and I think the Saints actually are the week 2 match. So there's a lot of early competition to deal with. And remember, the Saints have not lost in the regular season to Tom Brady yet. Like they own the Bucs in the regular season for all intents and purposes.
They didn't lose that game that Jameis went out on?
No, because wasn't that the game where like the Bucs just completely crapped the bed?
I don't remember, honestly.
I think it was, at least.
I spent all my brain power trying to get my internet back working today. So
absolutely. No, yeah. So that just my whole thing was, with detailing the schedule with that. I mean, I will say, so Justin, you keep missing Rick here, man. But Rick talked about how their offseason was really, going back and forth. Do you want to kind of talk about, like, I mean, you already detailed it, but what can Brady do here with this team offensively, and just like what they could look like? Because they lost a couple pieces on the line, but they were able to reconcile a little bit. They did add Russell Gage. I think he's going to have a big year for them. Leonard Fournette, this is not a hot take. This is my personal opinion. I think Leonard Fournette's going to have a big year for this team offensively, Justin, if they really want to keep the NFC South for them. Like, what are you expecting for them offensively? This is my analysis. I want to get your opinion on this. I think, unlike the Saints and Panthers, who we talked about, where the defense will at times have to carry the offense, I think this has to be a case where the offense needs to carry that defense, because that defense just isn't as talented as it was before.
Absolutely. That if you want to talk about things that were positive for the Bucs this year, I really do like what they did offensively. They faced a lot of turmoil. They had free agents leave via contracts and things like that. I think they addressed the offensive line well with the draft. They traded for the guy from the Patriots, the guard. And look, they still have Tristan Wirfs there. They still have Jansen there, their center. And I as long as Tom Brady's throwing that ball, they could beat anyone on any day. Obviously, we want guys like Chris Godwin and Leonard Fournette to stay healthy because they're major contributors at this point. But their run game is excellent, especially with Ronald Jones, a guy that was coming on before they signed Leonard Fournette as a backup. He's been a little disappointing in that position, but I mean, there's only so much you could do with the amount of carries you have. So Leonard Fournette was a killer last year, especially around the goal line. Chris Godwin, if he could stay healthy, he is the prototypical Brady receiver that he loves. And Mike Evans also just kills it when he needs a receiver for a big play. Mike Evans has been there.
Yeah.
So
1,000 yards every year in his career. That's amazing consistency.
Absolutely. He's on his way to a Hall of Fame spot. Mike Evans. If he can continue this for like another year or two, he's got a Super Bowl. He's got several Pro Bowls. He's played with some excellent quarterbacks. He's played with some not so excellent quarterbacks, and he has been consistent all the way through. So, yeah, I mean, they're going to need to win offensively to keep their defense in position to make plays. And I don't see any reason why they couldn't do that every game. As long as they stay healthy, that's what's important.
No, yeah, I think health, especially like because they lost a little bit with the defensive back crew in the offseason, because they lost on the defensive line. I think health on the defense is going to be the most important thing. I think that defense needs to we're talking about a team's like physical, like their doctors and their physical therapists and trainers that they're going to get to work this season. Like there's going to be a emphasis to make sure that the defense stays as healthy as can be this season. Because I think that defense like needs to be able to hold up and maintain as long as they can, as much as they possibly can in order to have a good year. And I'm 100% with you. Actually, before you came back on, I was talking about how I think the Buccaneers, I got them at 11 to 12 wins, more so 11. I think that the Saints are, to me, they should be a 10-win team. They could get more potentially, but I'll just slate them at 10 for now. Maybe 9, like you said, if they get like a bad break here or there. I think it's going to be extremely close between those two teams. And I think the two games between them are happening within the first 10 weeks of the season, if I'm not mistaken. That's going to play a massive role in the fate of this division as we get. Because even if the Saints split this year, I think it's going to be critical for Tampa, because again, and they also have a rough stretch towards the end of the season. They got the 49ers, they got the Cardinals, and teams like that. Like I think it's going to be big, Justin, to say the very least. So, Justin, you kind of alluded to it. So I want to get real quick here. Well, actually, no. We'll get your division standings in a little bit here. We want to get Rick's division standings. So, Rick, what are your thoughts? Oh, wait, hold on, ladies and gentlemen. My God, that's him. That's Rick. He's not on video. Well, he's technically on video, but he's not pre-recorded. He's live.
God damn it. I figured to myself, I was done with the graduation, and I made the video at 6 a.m., so, I was done, wanted to see where you guys were, and holy good God, what is going on with your audio and video, Justin? After I agree with you about Carolina, Carolina, by the way, what are we doing?
I feel like, the Seattle Seahawks of podcasts right now. I just didn't have what it takes to stay.
Oh, come on. You're better than that, Justin. You're the Seattle Dragons of podcasting, let's be honest.
And that's his phone.
Well, I'm driving, so what do you expect?
This is the most chaotic episode yet.
Yeah, you want chaos? Here we go.
Rick, do you want to stay on to actually hear your pre-recorded video about the division standings?
I mean, you know what? I think this is better. I think this is better than the pre-recorded video. So, I mean, it's up to you. Hey, you're the ship commander, Jurgen. You tell me. You want to play the pre-records we can all watch together, or what's the deal?
Well, I think it's funnier if we see two Ricks at once.
No, that would cause the rip.
I think we broke
Rick's internet. That's how I got here.
It destroyed Rick's connection. The idea that there could be two of them on the screen at once. So we'll give Rick a second there to get back. I think he's back. This might be the best episode yet. Actually, this ain't even bad. This is actually the best episode yet. Really, I would argue with the show. Rick, I mean, I do want to say I'd love for people to say it double, but as safely as you can, because you are driving. What is give us your standings on the NFC South?
Okay, standings for the NFC South. I'm going to go bottom to top like I did in the video that I recorded about, what time is it, 2:18, about 8 hours ago. Jesus Christ, what a day I've had. Okay, so we'll start off with like this. Okay, Atlanta's 4-13. They're at the bottom. I think it's a rough year for Arthur Smith's squad. I really don't see them doing that well, but I think they're going to make some positive strides forward. Desmond Ritter will finish the year out as the starting quarterback, and I believe that will carry him into a full starting role next season. The part that I had the biggest struggle with was Carolina, because I have them anywhere from 5-12 to 8-9 in third place, and it depends upon who's the quarterback. If it's Sam Darnold, they're 5-12. If it's Matt Corral, they're 6-11. If it's Baker Mayfield, they're 8-9. I think Baker Mayfield being on Carolina would be huge for them. It would be a good step forward for them, and might be the key to saving Matt Rule's job. I doubt it, but that's the big key. New Orleans is 10-7. They're a wild card team. They're not my biggest surprise, and that'll be a tease for later on in the show when we have actually working internet and, all three of us together at once. But New Orleans, I think, is making the postseason. It sucks that I forgot about Alvin Kamara's suspension, but even without Alvin Kamara there for a bit, they still got Mark Ingram, and they still got a really good offense, and their defense got a lot better, too. So I'm excited to see what Dennis Allen can do in this spot. Tampa's 13-4, and a lot of it's because of Tom Brady. I mean, I think that they're going to lose a lot of games to, like, L.A. and to Green Bay, but I think that they're just too powerful of a team and too talented to lose any other games than that. So Tampa wins the division going away 13-4, New Orleans 10-7, Carolina, pick your poison, 5-12 or 8-9, and Atlanta 4-13. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Okay. I mean, I will say Tampa with 13 wins. I think the both of us had them closer to 11, so that's definitely a little bit of a difference. But we all agreed. We all have, I'm assuming we all have Tampa. So I mean, Justin, now that Rick is live here, he gets to hear your predictions here. Are you going to shock us? Maybe. What's your standings looking like?
I mean, I might be a little shocking, but I'm not going to differentiate too much. I mean, I saw the March 31st Vegas rank under overs for teams win totals was 11.5 for the Bucs, and I think I'm going to have them go under. I don't see them winning more than 11 games this year, just for they have a tough schedule in the beginning, and I do think they win the division, but only going 11-5, only going 11-5. But the Saints are going to be a surprising team because, again, I agree with Rick. I could see them winning 9-10 games this year. It's all going to depend on the health of Jameis Winston and the availability of guys like Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara. So we'll see how many games they all play together on the field. But assuming that they're healthy, because I never want to make a prediction based on who I think is going to get injured, I think they're going to win. They're going to go 10-7 this year, and they're going to make a wild card spot. Now, again, Carolina, if they trade for Baker, that's another story. I could see them maybe going 8, maybe even 9 wins, depending on who they play. I know that they have some tough games, but they also have some really easy games on their schedule. Things as they are now, I don't see it. I'm going to give them a 6-11 year. I think it's another rough year. I think Sam Darnold is out. I think Matt Rule if he's not fired, he's certainly going to have some questions to answer. And even if that defense is red hot, defense may win championships, but it's not going to win them enough games to make the playoffs, so it won't make a difference. And Atlanta, you might see Arthur Smith out of there after 2 years. It's unfortunate for him. He had a rough go of things. Matt Ryan. You can make that face all you want, Rick, but they're going to be worse than they were last year, and they weren't that good last year.
Granted, I agree with you there, but at the same point in time, this is a team that had Dan Quinn as their head coach. I don't think Arthur Smith is going to be gone after 2 years. I agree. I don't think they're going to be good, but I can't see them pulling the trigger that quickly. This isn't a Steve Wilkes situation in Arizona, which is not fair to him, especially on Juneteenth weekend.
Well, listen. Let me give you this scenario. Would you rather have Arthur Smith as a possible lame duck coach in a team that has no assets, going in and drafting your next year's strong quarterback class, and then not being there the second year? Or would you rather wipe the slate clean after another disappointing year last year, give up whatever assets you can, keep whatever strong players you want, and start building like a normal franchise?
I think the problem is, and I think I mentioned this to you, I think the problem really is that with Atlanta, this is their first year without Matt Ryan as their main quarterback. And so that's going to be the big key, is I think how are they going to do without him there? And it gives Arthur Smith a real chance to kind of run the offense the way that he sees fit with a quarterback like a Mariota or with a Ritter. I think they're going to make some positive strides forward. I do. And I think if you put in the new coach there, it's going to ruin the momentum and reputation immediately. I think it's going to destroy what Ritter's trying to accomplish. And yes, the quarterback class is phenomenal for this year, but I want to see continuity in Atlanta. I want to see them, have an opportunity to really give Arthur Smith another shot. I think that would be a lot better. And by the way, the point that I was making, I agree about offensive linemen, but I think if you pair Drake London with Jackson Smith and Jigba, if he goes to Atlanta in the 23 NFL draft, that gives whatever quarterback is there two strong wide receivers and Kyle Pitts as your tight end as young weapons and a good core for the offense.
I don't disagree with that, but I think that maybe Atlanta screwed up a little bit, not pulling the plug a little earlier than they would have liked. They should have gotten rid of Matt Ryan last year and wipe the slate clean then. But they don't have that luxury now. They waited. They said maybe we'll be a little bit better than people anticipate. We'll catch a couple teams by surprise. And yeah, they did, but they didn't win enough games. They didn't do enough. And now they've traded Matt Ryan. They have one of the least talented rosters in the NFL. Like, I hate to say it that way because they do have some good players, but they're not a good football team. I don't expect them to win a ton of games. They could be a top 5 pick next year. And if that's the case, are you going to get a guy like Arthur Smith who's done nothing to help your franchise? Maybe he hasn't hurt you. Maybe he's, it's hard to see because they've been so bad and they have such little talent, but guys don't want to play there right now. You don't have that, alluring franchise. So you're not going to attract free agents. You're going to have a lame duck head coach. And then you're going to put all that on top of a rookie quarterback, which might be your, savior, so to speak, for the next few years. I mean, if they really want to do things right, it might just be time to let Arthur, no fault on Arthur Smith either. I'm not saying he's a good or bad coach. He didn't get a fair shot in Atlanta. Maybe he'll get another shot going somewhere else. But if I'm the Atlanta Falcons, I think I'm just going to clean house. I'll get a new GM. I'll let him hire the coach that he wants, and let's put together a football team the way it's supposed to, and let's see if we can actually get something going in Atlanta. Whatever they're doing right now, yeah, they got a couple pieces here, they got a couple pieces there. They don't have any semblance of a team. They have this and that, and I don't know how you connect the two. So in a tough division that you got guys like Tom Brady and defenses like the Panthers and the Saints, you're not doing anything to make yourself better by holding on to a guy like Arthur Smith and letting him coach a rookie quarterback for 1 year and then telling him, hey, you didn't do good enough year one, you're out of here. Makes no sense to me.
True, but I'm kind of on Rick's side here, Justin, where I think the organization realizes because they've now decided to let Matt Ryan go, I think they're going to give Smith a little bit more time. I think it's going to buy him some more time until they ultimately make that decision, whether it be that they're going to go, like if Ritter shows enough that they're going to say, all right, we're just going to stick with Desmond Ritter here for another year and see what happens. Or even if they do end up going with the new coach again, like Arthur Smith, like he hasn't gotten a fair shake. I think Arthur Blank is a pretty reasonable owner. I think he's going to give them a substantial amount of time to figure this out because they've hit their own reset button here once already. They might have to do it again here. I don't think that they can let him go and not give him a fair shake. I think Arthur Smith has a bit of a longer tenure here than we're expecting. The real question is who gets fired first now for Justin, Matt Rule or Arthur Smith? I think that's the storyline we're going to be looking at over the next year or two. That's for sure.
Well, listen. I mean, Atlanta's a proud franchise. I mean, despite all the misgivings that they've had in the past couple of years, after Dan Reeves and Mike Smith and Dan Quinn, I don't know if there was any other coach in the interim that was in between there. Maybe Raheem Morris might have been an interim at some point. But at the same time, since 1999, I can only name maybe 3 or 4 coaches that they've had as head coaches. I can name more for the Jets. I'm just saying that I think, in a case like that. And by the way, Dan Reeves went to a Super Bowl with Chris goddamn Chandler as his quarterback. And Tim Dwight. My man.
I was waiting for one more name.
You guys are saying you think that they're kind of resetting Arthur Smith's contract, so to speak. They're saying, all right, you're basically year one. Let's do what you got.
I think they're going to give him a little bit more time than I think we're expecting here because I think if you think that they might get a quarterback next year or the year after, that's essentially here's how I look at it. Every single time you get a new young quarterback you're putting in there, legitimately giving them a chance, I think that's a reset button for your head coach. I think it's a reset button. Well, if you're hitting the reset button twice for your head coach, you have to give him enough time to work with the quarterback.
The only scenario that I can foresee where maybe, stop copying me, Justin, where maybe they pull the trigger on that Arthur Smith deal is if Arthur Blank throws the gauntlet at Sean Payton to get him out of retirement to coach the Falcons next year. That's the only scenario I could possibly see. The problem is he's going to be in a bidding war with Jerry Jones because we all know that McCarthy's getting fired after this year. So I mean, what it's that's the only scenario because there's no other. That's the thing. You have to have a backup plan, or you have to have a logistical plan to go forward. And I don't really see any coaches that are on the market or any coaches that want to make that jump from college to NFL that really entice me the way that a Sean Payton would have. So I think in that respect, Arthur Blank isn't going to go looking for another head coach. He's going to ride the hand that he has with Arthur Smith because he's a good football mind too. So I give him the chance with an offense and try to improve that offense too. I mean, the Falcons weren't great until Matt Ryan got there, so you might be a piece away, but maybe if you have Ritter, it's a diamond in the rough scenario, as long as Arthur Smith can just guide him in the right mindset.
Fair. Hey, I think, wow, we gave Falcons fans way more talk than I thought we were going to on this show, and really that's what the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast is all about. We're going to stay on topics a lot longer than what we thought we were going to originally. To say the
I got heated. I got real heated, man. The traffic in Great Neck is one thing, but I got heated with the Falcon talk, Justin.
And also just overall,
man, you agreed with me on one thing. I need to see a heated Rick today. We've been too many recordings. Where is my rant?
I mean, you weren't here for him to even agree with you, Justin.
I know.
Let it mark it down. I agreed with you on one thing today, and your response, Internet decided to just say, nope, goodbye, we're done here. Not happening.
Speaking of we're done here, ladies and gentlemen, this may have been the most chaotic, the most eyebrow-raising, the funniest, the weirdest, the least well-produced, but overall, like I said at the top, the greatest and most chaotic episode of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast that we have had yet here, to say the very least. From this being a solo show for what was 50% of it up until the hour mark, which I hope I did a good enough job on for the people. From Justin's internet, just completely crapping out several times, where I think he actually switched to his phone at one point, if I'm not. Yeah. So he switched over to his phone at one point. From Rick making a surprise appearance here. From these two agreeing before, finishing off with vehement disagreements now about the Atlanta Falcons of all things.
And I'm driving.
Yeah, which not sure if it's legal to podcast and drive at the same time. So we'll probably end this soon so we can, get this off tape and off of Rick's record.
Saturday, come on, no one's out here on the road.
I can call my local congressman.
Hey, she was over at the graduation ceremony today, so you got to call her.
No, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. But that was this week's chaotic, I don't even know what to describe this. On brand episode. Yes, this was the most on brand episode of the Sports Agents of Chaos pod yet, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said last week, we're here to do three things. We're here to talk some football, we're here to have a little bit of fun, and we're here to just spread the right amount of chaos. I'd say a little bit like last week, but this was way more than a little bit this week. So that's your healthy dosing here for this weekend. And with that, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Rick, for the shock appearance here within the last half hour. Thank you, Justin, for getting your internet fixed. I'm sure you went up there and fixed all the wires. I highly doubt the cable company did.
I'm done myself.
There we go. Thank you all for joining us this week. We will be back next week, with another division, better service, better connection, better everything, because this show gets better and better each and every week. At least we like to think it does. But thank you all once again for joining us, and we will see you all